welcome to Platemark Series 2, The History of Western Printmaking. My name is Anne Shafer, and I am your host. If you've been following along, you will know that this is the episode that concludes our discussion of, well, actually, I think we might go further. Sorry. This is part 2 of the early Italian printmakers. So last time I cut True off mid-sentence almost. It was because we recorded more than 2 hours worth of information, and I decided to trim it for y'all. So you're welcome. So settle back, strap in, and we'll go for a ride. You're going to miss all of our positionality things and all that stuff, but I think you know where we're coming from if you are a regular listener. All right, here we go.
The Italians in their use of woodcut was really, there were 2 ways that we could really think about them. And one of them is in book illustrations, and the other, as we will come to see, would be in chiaroscuro woodcuts, which really start showing up 15, 16, 17, into like the 1530s. But then they're in no way linear. By then, they're trying to make them look like pen and ink wash, or rather wash drawings. Right. So we'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to let you know that the idea of these woodcuts, they grow from the same source. It's like, how do I add color to an image? And I love the fact that as though the North might have looked primitive, air quotes, medieval in its rendering, but the idea of the chiaroscuro woodcut, chiaroscuro means light, dark. It is a way of showing a print with not just the outlines that are in black or a darker color, but it also adds a second plate, at least one more color of ink to it. And what we're looking at right now is the Lucas Cranach image of St. Christopher. And Cranach, a northern artist, had developed this supposedly about 1509, realizing that because Cranach adored Dürer and followed him like a good sheep, and he rendered 50 portraits of Luther because he's a northern artist. But he's got this, and you can totally look at this figure and see, oh boy, is that a northern figure? St. Christopher's great big, and the image of the Christ child baby on his shoulders is little. And you've got this completely northern-looking landscape behind him in this vertical presentation. And it's all about the clear, crisp, black line block. And then the second block that would have been printed in perfect registration on top of that it would give you, well, what does it give us? What does that orange block give us, Anne?
Well, it gives you the atmosphere and the depth. It adds everything.
Clouds,
right.
Water, trees,
surfaces,
foliage, mountains. And it's this interesting orange in combination with the black line, and then the wonderful kind of buff color of the paper. So now you've got 3 colors, right?
The black goes down last, though, right?
In this case...
Really? Wouldn't the black go last?
It depends. And it actually flip-flops.
What?
Well, because the key block is, everything needs to fit to that. Well, let's look at the Ugo de Carpi. That would sound Italian to me. Ugo da Carpi. Doesn't sound like Cranach. And Ugo de Carpi had created what he believed. He wanted to get the patent for it in 1516. I invented this new thing. We're going to call it the chiaroscuro woodcut. And he's using a black line block of the color plate put on top of it. And yet there are little areas that have been carved away so you can get the highlights on. In this case, you're looking at an image of St. Jerome banging on his chest with a stone, because that's his attribute. But these are done at almost exactly the same time. But can you tell the northern figure from the southern? What's the difference between the northern figure rendering and the one in the south?
Well, it looks like the south is still using the parallel hatching.
Oh, absolutely. Even though it's in woodcut, but it's still using parallel hatching. You're right about that.
Yeah. And it does look like an ink drawing on top of a toned paper.
Absolutely. And isn't this sweet? Tizianus.
Oh.
It's a drawing by Titian.
Oh.
And then if you look really carefully down here somewhere, Ugo puts his little I'm hiding down here in the corner, kind of showing. But then Ugo de Carpi thinks he's invented it, but maybe it's sort of like, the pyramids that grew up in South America. And so where there were pyramids in Egypt, people can have similar ideas. But Ugo de Carpi also eventually comes up with the way of creating this magnificent 3-color ink. It's a chiaroscuro woodcut done in 3 different colors of green that recreates it really does not look like a pen and ink, or rather a wash drawing.
Well, there's no line block really.
Right. And so you have this pale green and a medium green and a nice rich dark green of
Diogenes, right?
Exact. Very good.
There's that bald chicken on the right there.
The students always like, what's with the chicken on the right? It's like, well, okay, so Diogenes is this, skeptical philosopher who just, wants to find an honest man who's wandering around, and he doesn't think he needs to own anything. In fact, he only owns a cup and maybe a spoon until he sees that there's a fellow that's actually able to drink from a stream with just his bare hands. So he throws away his cup, and he lives in a cave. And saying, what is it? Alexander the Great comes to visit him, and Alexander, I hear you're the most brilliant person of your time. What can I give you? And he goes, can you get out of my light?
I've forgotten that.
Yeah. So here's this heroic, big, muscular figure of Diogenes sitting here looking at his books. And on the right-hand side there's this chicken, this rooster, who's standing there with no feathers on whatsoever. And the reason that featherless biped is there is because we are humans are featherless bipeds as well. We're just stupid plucked chickens.
Gotcha.
But the idea is that the Italian desire to have a woodcut look more like a painting or an ink wash drawing was completely different than the concept of the North. Mm-hmm. And those two things, book illustrations really, and these kinds of artful chiaroscuro woodcuts, which are things that we'll talk about in connection with Parmigianino, are really, that's, the Italians are like, let's pay attention to engraving. That's really where it's at, because it looks more like, pen and ink drawings.
Right.
Yeah. They're a little snobbish about the old woodcut there.
Is that right?
Kind of, yeah. So this idea of the...
right, we're turning to Mantegna, peoples.
Well, yeah, we are, because so in this really wildly circuitous discussion we've had so far, comparing the North and the South, it's the Renaissance having 2 children, but the idea of what an engraving meant in Italy was a little different than in the North, because what it was, you had told me this thing about Dürer.
I know what it was.
Well, yeah, go for it.
I remember now. I feel like I had read somewhere at some point that Dürer was being held up as an illustrator.
Mm-hmm.
And that his renderings were too perfect or something, and that the only autographic sort of artist genius thing was coming out of Italy with Mantegna.
Well, and that's kind of ridiculous. I mean,
well, it is. I
can see the point where, of course, he illustrated the life of the Virgin. He did the Passion of the Christ, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And it's okay, fine. And
what rolled through my mind when I was thinking about it today was Wyeth. Remember, we went to see the Wyeth show up at the Brandywine.
Mm-hmm.
His works are unbelievably beautiful and not particularly illustrative.
No.
Right?
But they're full of narrative.
Yes, they're sure full of narrative. But at the same time, Bellows and Homer and all those people worked as illustrators. Like,
yeah.
Why did Wyeth get shunted off into some little tiny weeny box?
So, okay. And this whole concept of the idea of the illustrator, it's still an issue. If you want to watch...
It goes all the way back to Dürer.
Well, it goes, okay. What the hell was Michelangelo doing across the top of the Sistine ceiling?
Exactly.
It's Genesis, and he's telling the whole story, and from the deluge and all that.
And someone's paying him to do it.
Yeah. So shut up.
Right, exactly.
Again, like that question that fellow asked me is like, what's the difference between art and craft? And I said arrogance. Because sure, I mean, in one respect, if it's got one whit of narrative to it, then of course it's illustrative. Okay, well, so the Battle of the 10 Nude Men Is it illustrative? I don't know the story, but I do know that this guy, Palaiuolo, went and made this image, which I think he must have farmed off to another engraver. But when he did so, he also made a point. This is the part I love. There's this huge plaque hanging on the sorghum, right behind the butt cheek of Mr. Farthest Left Guy, that has a plaque, and it basically says Antonius Palaiuolo of Florence made this. And it's like, I want you to know, and you know, he has every right to say that because he's the first one that did that, right? And honestly, think about it. Dürer put those little plaques in everything he made.
Yeah.
And yet, if we go to Mantegna, who is the next big, let's talk about it. Mantegna, we know of him supposedly through 7 engravings.
It's crazy.
And yet, Mantegna was a brilliant painter, and he was incredibly inventive. And he, as a painter, you know, he would do these magnificent frescoes, and he was so wickedly clever. He, you know, he did everything he could to master perspective and to take his viewer to new places. But he was an illustrator. Think about, where was the place that you told me you just went?
Oh, right. The house in Mantua that has the ceiling fresco of the little cherubs looking over the railing.
And so it's the palace of the Gonzaga family in Mantua, and you've been there, and I haven't.
Graduate school.
And that's lucky. So, and I teach it every freaking, But the idea was that this room, which if I recall correctly, he labored over it for like 9 years. And with good reason, because he had this massive room. Isn't it in the top corner? It's on the top floor of the palace. Yeah. And the walls all show all of the great exploits of the Gonzaga family, including the fact that he was a cardinal of the Catholic Church, of course, and all the great things the Gonzagas did. And it's in perspective, and you can watch, you know, the nephew rising up to say hi to grandpa. And it's like, yeah, someday you'll get to be a cardinal too. And not that there's nepotism in anything, but the thing that Mantegna did was manage to marry the actual architecture with pure paint. And again, like Masaccio did in 1427, but here, and he completes it in 1474, he has painted away the architecture, literally.
Yeah, you think you're looking up to the sky.
Absolutely. So first, he paints what looks fictive architecture. He paints in all these different like volutes and arches and whatnot, and it's the Camera degli Sposi, the room of the newlyweds.
Oh, right.
And the oculus is this round aperture that Mantegna has painted onto the ceiling, which is the first illusionistic painting we have.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And it's like hey, Baroque, guess what? I invented this.
We're coming.
Check this out. It's the Renaissance. And I figured to say, he's a master of perspective. And so he creates immediately above your head an oculus and a rotunda, a circular painting in the middle of this whole ceiling that he's painted with, you know, vines and brackets and all kinds of architecture that look completely believable. And it looks like you're looking straight up through a balcony, a railing up into the sky. And over that railing are happy little people. There's a lady and her servant looking over, and there's a bunch of cherubs looking over the edge, and one of them standing there. And if you look carefully, you realize that this cherub with his little sex hanging out is peeing.
Yeah, he's peeing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's another one crying because his head is stuck in the railing, which I always say it's like, you know, that's before the codes are enveloped. Like, you know, when you get cribs now, the kids can't get their head stuck in there. But there it is. Here's this artist who is so brainy, creating this ridiculously fun, amusing, entertaining, wildly secular image of these folks looking down at you with the sky up above. And perched on that balcony is also a peacock. It's just the emblem of Juno, the goddess of marriage. And these folks like, are you going to, now think about it, Camera degli Sposi.
Do it now? It's
the room of the newlyweds. And they're all looking down like, ooh, make more Gonzagas. Oh, go ahead. Imagine. No pressure there, right? And this is the artist that is creating these 7, air quotes, engravings that we know of, and they're amazing, really. And so it seems to me that this artist has, using disegno, his brilliant drawing skills. The first one we see is called the Entombment, and it is again, with this parallel hatching, much like Palaiuolos, showing a scene of the entombment of Christ in his winding clothes being put into the tomb in the cave. And on the right-hand side, there's a St. John wringing his hands. And
I'm looking for that article on Mantegna that we read last week.
You can always, I know, it was great.
It's downloading. Hold, please.
Mm.
So if you're an Instagrammer, there's all sorts of interesting art historians and gallerists that you can follow. And one of them is Armin Kuntz, who is the gallerist at CG Burner. And they do Old Master all the way up to contemporary. And he posted the other day a small sort of review of an article by David Landau that appears in Print Quarterly recently that sort of talks about the what we know about Mantegna and the plates, the prints and the plates, and who did what. And it's fascinating because we think that there's another artist that did much of the engraving.
Yeah, it had to have been.
I was just trying to find his name.
And it's fascinating also because, well, frankly, I got to listen to this artitle being read to me
I did read it to you.
while I was inking the plate that Anne was helping me print. This was 2 weeks ago. And
Cavalli is his name.
Yeah. And it only makes sense, right? Because here is Mantegna, who's a brilliant fresco painter. And he's got great clients. Same with the Gonzaga family in Mantua. I mean, I don't want to disdain the Gonzaga family, but they were the Trumps of Mantua. Oh, sorry. I mean, they were a wealthy family, right?
Were the Medicis this?
They were just really wealthy and really good people. Okay,
they were good people.
Oh, sure. I mean, think about what they gave to the city in terms of. Oh, yeah. I mean, they weren't just
sidebar.
Yeah. That was actually an interesting conversation I was having with my students. Like, so they're like giving these chapels and stuff to the various churches, right, so that because it's a gift to the city. It's also say, hey, my chapel's bigger than yours.
Right.
I got this painter and you didn't.
Yes, Michelangelo did my tomb.
Yeah, but right, he put these women on there. Then he's never seen women. That's obvious.
Yes,
even though he knows his anatomy because Michelangelo did dissection too.
They must all have.
Well, not all, but for sure, Michelangelo and Leonardo for sure. Right. The coolest the whole dissection piece when I show them the students the Michelangelo part where he's painting he writes a sonnet about how when he's painting the ceiling of the Sistine ceiling, how the skin on his front is getting lax and weak because he's been upside with his neck craned to the ceiling, and
he's losing his musculature?
He's literally, his skin is so stretched out from having to reach up to paint the Sistine ceiling. That's part of it. And then the other ding, 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 ding.
Well, I can tell you a funny story. When my kids were little, the school, Mount Washington Elementary School in Baltimore, City School had a program called Picture Parent.
I loved it when you came home from those.
I know. And I never did this project because I thought it was too much work. But there was another mom, several moms actually, who made the kids do Michelangelo painting the Sistine ceiling projects. So she put them all, this woman, Monica Springer, who's amazing, got everybody in plastic bag smocks and had taped paper under everyone's desks, and everybody had to lie down and paint under their desks.
That's freaking brilliant.
I know.
Oh my God. Cute. And it's like, exactly. So it's like, my job is hard. I'm painting this. I'm illustrating the ceiling for Pope Sixtus. And that's why it's the Sistine Chapel after all.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
For Sixtus.
Sistine.
Bastard.
Yeah. So, and the other part was though, in another one of his notes, he's got this is completely off topic, but it shows you about the importance of the human body, that he shows a picture of what they had to do when the prior of Santo Spirito said, hey, Michelangelo, I got a fresh body. Come on down. And he scuttles down there and there's a sketch of him doing the dissection and he's put a candle in the chest cavity of the body so he can see what he's doing as he's doing the
light. Oh,
come on, man.
They can't see anything.
They can't see a freaking thing, and the body's going to be really rank really fast.
Right.
How do you learn your lessons? Think about it. And there's a great Leonardo quote about if you've dug around in the carcasses like I have, and still you haven't, maybe you just aren't a good enough artist.
Oh boy.
What it meant to be an artist in these times, and that's like the same with Mantegna.
So if you've got Polyhymnia describing for you the musculature of 10 people doing certain things, you're like, yeah, let me take that, and I'm not going to go carve up a body.
I don't have to carve up a body because
which
it's
illegal.
Yeah, and you could be excommunicated for it because,
it's sacrilegious.
Well, think about it, guys. You still shouldn't do that. I mean, don't be Jeffrey Dahmering your art career.
It is weird.
It
is weird, but
you can just go on up to Hopkins now and request you can get all that stuff virtually now. However, imagine being a guy risking everything in going to carve up to see what's under there. What is it? What are the things that guys will do? Like if it's not working, you hit it with a stick, you take it apart. It's how do you? Thing? Oh yeah, totally.
Really?
It's like take it apart, figure out how it works.
Oh, I can't stand taking shit apart.
Oh, are you kidding?
Because every time I do, I'm like, I don't know how that went back together. I just don't.
Well, don't leave anything extra, right?
Right. I have to take pictures of every step.
Well, that'll get boring.
I know. My brain doesn't really work.
Well, but see, that's like okay. So depth perception too. So Mantegna is already, an accomplished fresco painter when he starts to put together the ideas to put these images to have them be made into engravings. Now, I really believe he must have had someone engraving for him. The fact is, though, that he believed in it enough to have done that. So the first one, the Entombment, which I just described to you.
Well, yeah, just the fact that he said, "Hey, Cavalli," or whoever it was, Campagnola, help me get this thing out there. But remember in the article, there was a big point made about how Mantegna had a contract with the Gonzagas not to sell, so that in the end, the prints weren't for mass reproduction.
They were
they were special for gifts for people.
Exactly. And that tells you everything again about the nature of collecting in the Italian Renaissance and that whole concept of the disegno of this artist genius and
special.
Tremendously special.
And it wasn't for the masses like
up
in Germany.
Right. I mean, Dürer was selling everything he could, as he should have.
He's a humanist.
Yeah. And you get the idea out there. You can read it. You can see it. And here, I mean...
but Dürer was under the aegis of Maximilian.
Eventually, yeah.
It's weird, though, this whole patron thing and about how specialized art production...
I think that he was savvy enough as a youngster that he was when he starts carving, let's say, the Apocalypse. He's already smart enough to figure out, hey, I'm not selling as many paintings as I can prints. I'm going to make this.
But it's almost like he's ahead of Martin Luther.
Oh yeah, he's an entrepreneur. He's a smart guy. He figured, okay, how do we get these prints out there? We put them in barrels and we ship them off.
Well, as a monetary thing, but also as a humanist thing.
In one respect, I think you could be absolutely right.
There's a paper there.
I think you're going to have to write it.
Oh, no.
I'll give the PowerPoint, but I'm not going to write it.
Anyone need a dissertation topic?
No, you get to do the writing because that's you. I have to run around and be silly.
All right, sorry. Back to Mantegna.
Mantegna, though, I mean, you can always see in Mantegna the sculptural qualities of things. You can always see a sense of the ancient... the Greco-Roman traditions coming back. If you look at a Mantegna, they really do look like sculptural figures against a flat background. It's though he Christianized. If Anne and I are looking right now at an Entombment of Christ from 1465 or so.
Well, and there's no Tyrolean landscape behind it. It looks like it could be in Jerusalem. Oh
yeah, I mean, in the distance, engraved into the plate is a winding road and three little crosses in the far distance.
Right.
But it's just way off there, and it's not the whole.
It doesn't need a lot of description.
Nope. It's like you need to look at this here. And that's what we're going to put on the front of this the triumphal arch, or this is what we're going to put on the facade of the church. There's a very architectural, sculptural quality, I think, to the way even Polyhymnia is making his image, unlike what the northern artists seem to be doing.
Interesting.
Now, so this
more three-dimensional.
More three-dimensional and less at the same time,
right?
Because it's in alto relief. It's like bas relief. It's like it's in relief. It's like yeah. So it's like the picture plane goes back 5 or 6 feet,
right?
as opposed to
there's a painted scrim behind them.
Yeah, there's still that, even in the Mantegna, it's like, voomp, and it's right here. And the deepest you need to get into that is, is no more than 5, 6, 7, 10 feet max. Right. And yet the northern artists will let you wander all the way back into the background, and it'll be much fainter.
I think that's about just because they were attention to nature / detail.
Well, if we go back to look at the comparison of the Jan van Eyck and the the Masaccio, it's the same exact thing.
Right.
Think about it.
It goes all the way back.
Yeah.
Huh.
Again, I think it's that naturalist sense of the beauty of all of God's earth, of every texture, every leaf, every flower, every tree, every cloud, every body of water.
The
city.
Italians want you to pay attention to the story.
Right up here. Yeah. It's right up here. The bodies.
Don't get distracted.
Which is kind of surprising.
It is kind of surprising.
But don't worry, it'll change. But it is totally, if you look at these two, I'm actually comparing them to the a relief from the Arapachus of Caesar Augustus.
Oh, yeah. So we've got Palaiuolo, Battle of 10 Nudes, and the Entombment by Mantegna.
And they're all looking like Roman sculptures on a sarcophagus, on the surface of a sarcophagus. Right. And that's not something you would see in the north. Why? They didn't have a whole lot of sarcophagi sitting around up north, Their whole tradition comes from manuscripts and from church windows and from seeing things in miniature.
So they weren't sculpting sarcophagi as things that should be out and seen. Is that what you mean?
They don't have that kind of sculpture.
They just bury people in little pine boxes.
Well, if you think about sometimes I'll show, let's say the tympanum of the cathedral in Strasbourg. And I would compare that to the Schongauer. And artists are going to take their cues from all kinds of places. They're going to take it from the church architectural sculpture. They're going to take it from, if there's sculpture in their town. But let's say you're in the north and it was just always being overrun by the Goths and the Visigoths and the Franks and the this and the that. And there's no real settled anything. There's some Roman ruins sitting around here and there, but they're so far and few between compared to
They're
Italy.
Still ready to bolt when shit happens?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's just a completely different sense of permanence.
I think that it's hard to remember and imagine what daily life is like.
Oh, God.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. For one thing.
We're coming out of the dark ages here.
You have to make everything you wear. You have to kill or grow everything you eat. Right there. That's enough to say, there's my day.
Yes, indeed.
Now, wait, I want something pretty for my wall.
I think about the laundry.
Since you only owned about 3 pieces of clothing,
true,
and you only wore it until it fell off, and you didn't really, you didn't have to wash it very often because
you don't sleeping on hay,
and you don't bathe very often. So, your clothing is your second skin. It's what's you really have to realize. You have to think about where do you see art?
Yeah,
I see it in church,
right?
And I see it. Maybe there's the guy, the blacksmith down the street, maybe has a sign with an image on it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
You don't have access to books.
This is why the fucking church is.
Now, Anne, you're going to have to.
The problem is that the Catholic Church is problematic, but it is responsible for what we call Western culture in the arts.
It's a structure.
Yeah. And a patron.
I almost said, imagine what it would be like if Donald Trump had all of his desires met. What would our culture look like?
Right.
Remember that for Trump, that having a raw booby on a sculpture in public was too much. And he said that all public buildings should be neoclassical.
Oh, I've forgotten that.
Mm-hmm. Anybody in power can say anything they want. Thank you, Il Duce.
It's so weird because, anyway. We won't go into Trump.
So Mantegna has this way of creating a scene which looks as though it's in bas relief, like you might see on a sarcophagus or on a Roman triumphal arch or some other kind of image. So we talk about the entombment of Christ. Well, okay, it's a sad scene. I've never really cared for this one as much. It just seems so dry.
I can't even figure out what the hell's happening.
Well, you're going to show that. Okay,
but is that Christ coming up out of the tomb? No, he's going into the. But where is Christ?
He's in the winding cloth
there he is.
right here.
See, I go straight to this person.
I know. So the guy that's got his
composition doesn't work.
I know. But that's one of the 7. So if you listen to Linda Holtz, it's like everybody like, oh, but Mantegna's are so much better. They're the best. But the thing that I do appreciate is that Dürer respected these prints, and so much so that he did, in fact, do studies, as many artists want to learn. Any other artists are going to do copies after the artist that they are meant, is their mentor.
Admire, sure.
Indeed, they're emulating them. And so Dürer has taken a look at some of these heavy, wonderfully statuesque kinds of figures, and he does use that kind of a pose, and he thinks about that as he's composing his own engravings some 10 years hence. He learns a great deal, and you'll see that if you look at another Mantegna print up the road. We'll talk about the Battle of Sea Gods. The one that rocks my world that we always showed in class.
Longinus, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Tell. Well, because here's.
All right. What are we looking at?
Let me tell you what I think I see here. In this image, Mantegna really has focused our attention on 3 characters. Christ has risen from the tomb, and it really is called the risen Christ between St. Andrew and St. Longinus. And it has 3 figures. They're immediately in front of us. It looks very much like a pen sketch. Literally a dip in the ink and then make your lines. And
it looks like a fresco in a chapel to me.
Of course it does.
Right.
That's the beauty of the disegno and then the invenzione.
Okay.
And you go, well, okay, it's one guy between 2 guys. But the fact is that it's the risen Christ. He's the tomb, the sarcophagus is behind him. It's not a cave even. But there he is, and he's got this really seriously pronounced, that halo could,
it's physical.
You could use that as a discus.
Like a frisbee.
But, seriously, but look at that Christ's core. Man, this is
he's ripped.
The anatomy is absolutely believable. His weight shift. He's got a contrapposto. He's standing with weight on one leg and a little
foreshortening on that arm, the elbow that comes over.
It is contracting from view. It's completely believable physical presence of Christ on earth holding a staff, which, if you think about it, could be all the more like any kind of ancient Greek sculpture of a spear bearer.
It splits the composition.
Really. And on the left is Saint Andrew, who is holding his attribute. It's a cross. He was crucified on a cross also. And he is looking, and look at the halo. There is this perfectly round disc, but the fabric of his I don't know if it's a toga or what, but it's completely believably wrapping around and through his body. These figures have mass and weight. They are indeed sculptural. And the hands are they're not like sad little rubber gloves. They're worked. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, and that cross is angled so that it takes us straight to the heart, literally, of Christ.
Oh, yeah.
And then on the right-hand side is St. Longinus, who was a Roman who he's the one that skewered Christ in the side with his spear. Just, is he dead yet? And he shot that spear in his side. Doubting Thomas put his fingers into the wound of Christ to see.
Longinus had poked?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
And Longinus, as he skewered the side of Christ, was completely
converted?
Yes.
Really?
Take a look at your Rembrandt and you'll see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because look at his devotion here. It's
right.
it's really stunning. There's his emblem right there, the skewer, and the wound is obvious in the side of Christ, and he's blessing. Christ is blessing, and all is forgiven. And the thing that's also interesting about this, though, is a print is something, an intimate moment that you hold in your hands. It is your moment of private worship. Imagine holding this right in front of you in your collection, and you pull it out and you look at this thing that it looks like a pen drawing, and it's a special piece done by a great artist. And look at his helmet's down there. The lid of the lid of the sarcophagus is open. He has now emerged. He has been resurrected. The risen Christ between these 2 saints that are just, it's you, right? And the devotion of.
It's interesting that they're not looking at
No. They're looking down.
Can't.
No, they can't look at him. They're not. Oh, how can it? Oh, their reverence is profound.
Right.
Notice that Longinus does not have a halo.
Right.
But and even the background. Notice how the hatching is still. If you soften your gaze, you see that that the light and shadow is working for you. But if you look carefully, as Anne Shafer would say, it rewards scrutiny, because as you pull in, you can see the handedness of the sketchy marks that are made.
Well, it's almost the other side of the perspectival bit of the
it balances
cross.
it. Yeah, it's the foil for it.
Right.
And think about this: it implies that this person is right-handed as they're sketching, correct?
But
when you're engraving it, it's exact opposite, because it has to be
carving it to
right, and it has to be done in reverse. So you've created this.
Maybe he was left-handed.
Created this wonderful conceit of a sketch of this sacred moment. Now, we're not even done yet, though, because your point of view, POV, tremendously important here. And Mantegna is already a master of this. We know, because we talked about the oculus, the painting in the ceiling. There's other things that he does here. He puts us low in the scene. Look, that we're below. We're looking up.
Sure.
We're looking up.
Well, just like in the fresco paintings, right?
Indeed. And there's even a foot that extends beyond the frame.
It comes out of the square?
Yes, it does.
He broke the fourth wall.
Yes, he did. And
that must be a first.
Yeah. It's like 1470, and he's going, he's here.
Oh, my heavens.
And,
that's why would it be the saint and not Christ breaking the wall? I guess do they both break the wall?
It's as though we are allowed to enter into this moment.
Come with me. I am in the presence of.
And it's just, you don't need a bunch of other stuff. Like the Northern artists are going to give us the whole filmic thing.
Right.
But, here we are at the feet of Christ, looking up into this. You are forgiven.
Nice.
And you can imagine that moment, and you see these beings that are understanding that they are in the presence of the divine. That, to me, is a fairly successful image. And yet he's using the parallel hatching that Palaiuolo was using, and he's got that certain knowledge of the human figure, unbelievable knowledge of the figure.
Sure.
Now imagine our friends up north. You better put some nice wool on top of that. You're going to get awful cold.
They don't know what's
They don't know what's there. They don't need to. That's not their worldview. That's not their frame of reference. And it's amazing. Christ has this fabric that wraps just around his midsection and covers what it should.
It's diaphanous, but not diaphanous.
Yeah, it's descriptive. And you keep that in mind if you think about the dead Christ that he paints in 1509.
Oh, the feet.
Yeah. And I think those ideas came out at this moment. He's realizing, I'm at the feet of Christ, and I'm looking up at that. And as a fresco painter, and he's realizing what he can do to eradicate the distance between the viewer and the subject.
Right.
And that's happening in this little bitty plane, this arena that he's created here.
Right.
And, so when you you read our writers are basically rhapsodizing about how nothing surpasses Mantegna. Well, in a way it doesn't. Because and I'm showing now is a fresco that Mantegna had painted on the wall of the Church of the Eremitani, which was way up high on the wall, and is using the same incredibly low, like worm's eye view perspective.
But wasn't that a thing that if you were painting on the wall of a chapel, you were supposed to make it work for the person who was standing on the floor?
And he is.
Right. But didn't Masaccio and Giotto do that?
They did, but Masaccio, at the foot of the cross, your eye level is exactly where all of the vanishing points come together.
I see.
And this one is up.
You're more...
If this is like 20 feet in the air.
You're more supplicant, or?
No, it's a whole cycle of frescoes that goes all the way up the wall.
Right.
But of course, I would love to tell you more about this, but the church was bombed, and thank you, Germans.
Oh.
So it doesn't exist anymore. However, the brilliance of his use of perspective and organizing a space is absolutely implied. And you can even see here how the various kinds of things, like the architecture and the placement of the spears and the foreshortening, meaning the contraction of the figures from the picture plane, like Uncle Sam saying, "I want you,"
right.
And we're able to read that. Yes, but here's a guy figuring that out in the 1470s.
It is remarkable. Okay, all right, I'm a fan.
You better be. Because wait, there's more. Oh, look, there's the chapel.
I forgot all the rest of it.
Yeah, okay. So imagine how all of these things are playing together, looking at architecture, looking at sculpture. How do I render those? How do I render them so that they appear real in paint on the walls of a room? How do I create trompe l'oeil, this I'm fooling your eye to believing that you are there. And to realize that that's the first time. And that particular fresco that he finishes in 1474 is the very stuff that the Baroque ceiling painters are going to be exploiting 150 years later.
Oh, for sure. I mean, up into Tiepolo.
Oh, yeah, totally. I can't wait to see it.
It is great.
So with that said, when we were talking about the Commodore degli Sposi, and we have the peacock of Juno looking down as the goddess of, marriage, and you have all the little cherub, the Puto, the little children of Venus.
The peacock. Oh, look at the little bum of them.
The little bum of the child. I mean, come on, and little Mr. Pee-Pee and the little head stuck in there. And then there's five quasi adults that are waiting for you to make more little Gonzagas.
Oh,
and then there's
an Arab,
a person that is not white.
Oh boy,
right. And hey, that was really expansive of you. And then there's the pole that's holding up the planter.
Yeah.
And if anybody bumps that pole, it'll roll away and the planter will fall on the newlyweds. Like, okay, well, surprise, surprise. So it shows you that the artist has a sense of humor, but he's also, an artist of intellect. And all of the go forth, be fruitful and multiply kinds of fruit that are circumnavigating this entire oculus, it's hilarious, right? However, he knows his mythology too. So we've got two Mantegnas that are some of my faves because they are scenes of, let's just go get drunk and have some fun. It's very mythological.
Sure.
All right.
Everyone loves a good bacchanal.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the bacchanal and these nude figures. And there's it's delightful always to see a half man, half beast, excited to be taking in some wine, and these physical features of figures that are gathered around a wine vat, and then the accompanying pendant piece that goes with it, other drinkers that have had way too much, and Silenus is totally potted, and they're all nude and have had their fill of wine. Even so, they're all still right towards us like sculptures. But wouldn't it be fun to be at that party? And by the way, if you look at the Bacchanal, there's this figure that is sort of like a latter day sexy.
It's like a
David. Yeah,
for sure.
It's like, I don't need to conquer the David and Goliath. Just have some wine and chill the hell out, But you can see that these engravings have all of the physical capabilities of becoming frescoes. They totally can.
Why make them?
So that I could have one instead of, I don't have a villa, but I could own a Mantegna and put it in my collection and it would look like a baby fresco.
Economic.
Absolutely.
Okay. Just checking.
I can have my own little Mantegna and my wonderful little, print collection, because these are becoming a thing now, right? We're talking into the latter part of the 15th century. And the way that he is emulating antique sculpture and showing the beautiful nude bodies, it helps to use mythology to give you the nudity
excuse.
Anne is never quite as keen on the nakedity as I am.
I think the human body's a freaking miracle, but I'm sick to death of the female nude.
Well, you're not real pleased with the male nude either.
No.
You don't like seeing the naughty bits.
Well, the male gaze thing is just, I'm done.
I completely get it. And there's an interesting article that I give to my students, Dirty Old Masters, when we talk about the Venetian Renaissance and all of the nudes that they introduce. But if at the moment, I'm showing Anne a comparison of Albrecht Dürer's Fall of Man, the Adam and Eve, and the way it's a restatement of classical sculpture. The beauty of the human figure, and you can see that he's been looking at his Mantegna, and you can see that he embodied it and managed to conflate those things into this biblical thing, which I would hope that's slightly more palatable to you.
No, it is. I mean, I don't know. I'm so conflicted about it, honestly.
I think at the end of the day, we can both agree that it's a brilliant making. Now, here's one I want you to remember, because you always had to bring this out. It was in a frame.
It was framed, yeah.
And it's a really triumphal double plate.
It's big.
It's huge, actually. It's like almost 3 feet across.
Yeah.
And it's a battle of the sea gods. Mantegna, but it's an engraving. It's huge, and Dürer actually copied the right hand half of it to learn Mantegna's method. Oh, you tell them what they're seeing.
Oh,
It's just so much fun.
This is the Battle of the Sea Gods, and all sorts of stuff is going on. My favorite is, well, there's several. The saggy titty lady on the left. It's the
one that Adrian Figgis wrote about, right?
Yeah. Like, what is she doing there?
Okay, so
envy, right? She's envy.
Invidia. So all of these righteous figures with their hooved it's sort of like centaurs, but the marine version of them, right? The sea gods are in there. There's a lovely woman that it seems to be riding the back of one of the sea gods that are rollicking about in this body of water, which is, again, real close to us.
Really close.
But the musculature is delightful. I'm also always taken by, the fins and the strangeness and the snarling horses and the activity of it and the horns and the trumpet. I mean, it's a battle of the sea gods.
Is that a mirror up top?
Yes, indeed. And snaky tails and writhing and all of this is, this is incredibly cutting edge, if you will.
It's kind of weird.
Well, it's all sea gods. So
it's not Christian.
Of course not. They're sea gods.
Right.
So there's all kinds of...
So we're going back to the myth.
Of course we are.
And an excuse, too.
Absolutely. And to show off figures like in every which position. But now it's just the godly version of Palaiuolo, but you get to add water, add women, add fins, and add, even more parallel hatching, and you're in good shape. But the one that...
Wait, they still haven't gotten to cross contour at this point? I mean, sorry, cross hatching?
No.
Wow.
This is still looking like an Italian pen drawing without question. But the thing that Anne is referring to is a wonderful little trope that appears from time and time again. And there's a woman who is really annoyed with this whole situation, and we refer to her, trigger warning, as the saggy titty lady.
She's upper left.
Old hag, and she's holding out a little plaque that says Invidia, which means envy, and there she is, like, looking really pissed, and with her pendulous breasticles hanging in front of her, sort of looking like eggs in socks, just dangling there and looking in on this whole scene. And she's probably envious because of the luscious, wonderful, young, comely women who are happily being absconded by the other sea gods. It's this marvelous, rollicking kind of... I can understand why people would adore, rich people, erudite people would enjoy adding this to their print collection.
I can only hope it's all consensual.
Of course, well...
Yes.
Of course it is. They are sea gods after all.
Yeah.
So it's just delightful to see his caliber of drawing and his ability to use the human form.
I mean, compositionally, it is...
dandy.
It is dandy.
And it wants to be a fresco.
Yes.
It is a fresco, except that it happens to exist on two pieces of paper that are joined and that you could have in your collection at home. And honey, I'll do that.
Right.
I'd tap into that right now. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I mean, I'd rather have this than the 10 nude men battling.
Sure.
I confess.
Yeah, actually, I would too, even with those.
Because I feel like they're very static.
They are. And these aren't.
No.
These are active. It looks as though there's a consequential next...
something's going to happen
after the pose that they're currently in. And so, but it is the fact, the excellence of this kind of drawing, the knowledge of the anatomy and being able to put all of those things together. And you can see the invenzione. You can see the brilliance of the artist coming up with this organization, remembering that had never existed before.
Right. I think that's critical.
Absolutely. Opening a new line of vision.
Is she the first saggy titty lady we come from?
That I'm aware of, right off the top of my head.
Envy as a saggy titty lady.
Yes, Invidia, and we had a beloved student do an entire series of a paper on the saggy titty lady.
Yeah, shout out to Adrian.
Adrian Figgis, we love you.
We love you.
So there's our friend Mantegna doing a fine job, and so he really kind of brings the curtain down on the 15th century, and we then realizing that all of that knowledge of the anatomy. This, by the way, I'm showing Anne the Mantegna painting of a Saint Sebastian being compared to the Fasciculus Medicinae,
right?
And realizing that the artist knows more than the medical folk do about what the human body looks like. I think that's amazing.
It is amazing.
And it is the medical folk.
Makes perfect sense, really.
Right. And so the medical folk, okay, you know how to draw? Okay, I need you to render this.
Draw
And
this
that's
woman.
how we end up getting Titian doing those various, or somebody from the studio of Titian doing the drawings of all of the dissections that Vesalius was doing, which would be published in his tome. Because these two things have to feed each other. You can't have just some med student going, "Hey, I'm going to draw a figure."
There's a muscle there.
Yeah, just to be able to convincingly do it. So the artist had to have that skill.
Oh my gosh!
What are you seeing, Anne?
Well, I don't even know where this painting is. This is the painting of
Brera in Milan.
Milan. Okay, so we're in Milan. There's a picture of the Mantegna Dead Christ, which basically you see from his feet scooching back to his head. So in unbelievable perspective.
Yeah, absolutely believable. And this is that kind of perspective that you would see Albrecht Dürer try to depict in his treatise on perspective some 20 some years later in the last decade of his life because he so revered the vision of Mantegna. And this is actually what Anna's seeing, a picture of me slightly schwitzing because I'd run all the way from the Milan Cathedral all the way to go see this one painting on, I think, the fourth floor of the Brera Museum in Milan.
Well, and I remember at some point you said to me, this is the third woodcut in the series that hasn't been accomplished.
Okay. All right. So I have this series.
I was dying to see this.
Really?
Yes. I told you that way back then.
Okay. So, when we talk about the Mannerists,
we'll get to your work.
Well, apparently I've done, it's, okay. So maybe this will happen. I don't know. Anne may twist my arm, and this is how this happens too. So the kinds of works that would inspire any artist, whether if they're a print, they can travel. If they can make it over the Alps, they can inspire, like Mantegna did with these air quotes 7 engravings, because to be able to own such a thing and have the work of a respected muralist in your own collection, you may not have the palace for the frescoes, but you might have the means to own that artwork. I, as a poor little art teacher at an art school in Baltimore, am looking at some prints on my walls, and I can say I have 2 Colvitts, and I have a Daumier, and I have a Goya, and that's saying something, because you
want your heroes around you.
Yes. And to show off all of those things in your print collection. That's really where we are at the end of the 15th century.
Well, it's endless inspiration, really.
It is. And so not just inspiration for the maker, but for the viewer and the collector. And the concept of the collector in Italy, for sure, they had a very, realizing that we had told you about how there was that the levels of collection in Dürer, right? Dürer had the people that would go for the woodcut cycles, or they would go for the large woodcut cycles, or the small engraved cycles, that each of those had their own socioeconomic class. And if you think about it, largely what we're seeing with the Italians is a lot of great engraving. And finally, we would end up seeing engraving taken to the next step. Of course, Dürer idolizing Mantegna, and you can totally see if we do a comparison of Dürer's Virgin holding an infant Jesus to a Mantegna, you can see the homage is complete. It really, really is. You can see.
But it's interesting too, because Mantegna does. I mean, his fabric folds on her cloak are downright northern.
I think they're a little bit clingier, frankly.
Well,
But yes, I mean,
it's an attempt that we haven't really seen too much of.
You're right about that. But I also think it's a maternal kind of, it's an interesting.
You definitely have a better sense of her legs under than you do with the Dürer, for sure.
But this Madonna of Mantegna's is sitting nowhere, and Dürer's is someplace, and she's
on a pillow,
and she's emitting light. And she's
interesting
in a moment, and Mantegna said, no. All you need to do is look at this moment of a mother holding her child. But it's with no halo.
And no halo. And also look at the expression on the baby's faces. Dürer's baby is sort of happy-go-lucky, I'm sleeping. And Mantegna's is staring out like, ah.
But this is also a new invention, this Italian baby.
Yeah.
That's a totally new invention, because the Flemish, the people up north are doing these. Well, through the Middle Ages, that idea of the homunculus, the little old man baby, was Christ as a little old man being held by his mom. It was an adult baby. And the Renaissance, the idea of starting to notice that babies have squeezy flesh and they are infants, and realizing that Christ was a child, and depicting that as an aspect of nature as well. It's really marvelous to see artists starting to paint babies.
Well, and his
little squishy
feet.
Anybody that's been a parent that has nibbled on the toes of their infants understands that. And Mantegna gave that. Considering how dry one could say Mantegna is.
Yeah, sometimes you're like, hey, and then all of a sudden you hit on a little spot like that.
And there's that. And then the way she's holding him. Look at her sweet face.
Right.
That's that Mantegna of the Virgin and the Child is far more endearing than the juror.
It's more human.
Yeah, it's absolutely human, right. So everybody gets to figure out their own way. Besides, Dürer is busy trumpeting himself in this, and Mantegna doesn't put his name on any of them.
That's so weird.
He doesn't need to.
Right.
That blows my mind.
It is crazy.
So we know that Mantegna's Virgin and Child was printed so many times that it degraded so far that somebody had to go back into it and retouch it, and it's really painful to see. But I'd still even do that. I have a posthumous restrike of a Colvitz. I'm fine with that. It touched her plate. That's all I care, right? So what we got to see today was a real range in Mantegna, taking us from that idea of the Greco-Roman past and starting to really overmap that with the Christian story, humanizing it completely with the Virgin and Child, but also letting us romp through the varieties of poses that humans can have on galloping across a sheet of paper as battling sea gods. But really, truly, I think the Battle of the Sea Gods is the one that, if it were me, I might have to own that one, because it really lets me have a piece of the painter that could be in my house. You could almost put that up on a wall and say, he's here. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
See, it's always really hard to say, well, which one would you get?
I know.
I'll take one of everything. It's fine. And so the idea of thinking about an artist such as Dürer, because we're always going to come back to him, having the wherewithal to go, I have to go see what this guy's about. Imagine walking.
Well, it was an interesting admission that somebody else might be doing something that you're interested in.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about, listen to anything on NPR and you talk about somebody, a rock artist who says, oh man, I was totally listening to blah, 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 and he changed my world. And it, like Huey Lewis listening to Joe Williams. And Joe Williams swings and basically it's like, oh, and then you can hear it in Huey Lewis, right? And you think about how anybody, like, what's that hook? What's that trigger that gets an artist going? I just so respect somebody that would walk across the Alps to do this. There was reading one Italian we won't talk about is Jacopo da Barberi. He actually was the one Italian artist that we know of that was living north of the Alps.
Oh gosh!
Simultaneous with Dürer, and it was actually in the same region as Dürer, and was doing all kinds of stuff. But that's why they called him Jacopo da Barberi, because he was up there with the barbarians, the other guys.
Oh no!
And he kind of puts Venetian printmaking on the map too. So it's folks get around. That's why History of Prints gives you it's a window into just how people could live. I think we've lost
window into societies.
I think we've lost sight of the fact that. What is it that trips your trigger? I mean, we're so busy looking at our phones and not realizing that there's a big thing. I got to go see that. I got to go do that. Something's like watching a water spaniel sniffing water and then like lunging and you got to go do it. Like our family dog was a water spaniel. And I was 5 and Mom said, okay, you can take him for a walk, but don't let go of the leash. All right. So this dog, which weighed 80 pounds and I weighed maybe 50, taking this big stupid dog for a walk, and it smells Whitmer Pond in Des Moines, Iowa. And at the it's a block away. And I'm like, la la la, walking down the street, and the dog like, and he starts lunging for this water. And like these artists must have been lunging to go find this thing. It's like freaking magnetism, right? And this dog, we named him Fafner out of the name of a dragon in a Wagner opera, whatever. But so I'm 5, and I'm like, and the dog is like lunging for the water, and he goes bounding across all these cool teenagers that are laying on the Whitmer beach, like getting the sun, right? And he goes boosh, 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 boosh into the water, and I was told not to let go of the leash. And it's a scary pond. It has snapping turtles in it. But I'm into the water and be like, let go of the leash. Seriously? But it's like, this is what I think about when it's like, Dürer has to go see these people. He's on foot or on horse. I don't care. He's having to go find out what's out there. You're Palaiuolo. You got to know what's under that skin. You got to know what it looks like. You got to go do it. Why do you climb the mountain? Because it's there. That's the way I think about these guys. It's like, how do you open a new door? Well, first you have to fucking build the door. And these guys did that, right?
Yeah.
That's what blows my mind. And so find your mentor. That's all I got to say for a night. All right, so we're going to stop with my boy Mantegna because he got Dürer all juiced up. And we'll get on to those other boys that stretch out the figure and be mannerists. We'll do it another time.
Right.
I'm done for tonight. Okay. What do you think, Ann?
I think we're done.
Let's go swimming in Whitmer Pond.
Oh my gosh, what a story. Oh my God.
Let go of the leash.
I had a moment of that on the sailboat with the sail, letting go of the line because it had, jibed or whatever. My dad's like, let go. Like, you told me to never let go.
It's like, I must do this thing.
Yeah.
You get it locked into your head. And it's like, if you got to see that person and you got to go to the mountaintop, you're going to go. And I respect that. And so I'm right now, Ann and I are looking at a pair of Dürer. One is a woodcut of Saint 1993, and the other one is the Saint Jeromeus study that she did in 1514. And this is a person who had to go to the source. And you look at what it did to change his thinking and his vision and his way to render the world. His whole worldview was altered by those travels. And that's just the kind of, whether you're doing it in an armchair or on foot, go for those big moments. That's my thought.
Always goes back to Dürer.
Well, for now, yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to go back to Dürer.
Yeah, we'll scooch out of Dürer soon, I think.
Maybe.
We could be here for a while.
Rembrandt collected Dürer, too.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, he's just a German. I bet he didn't know any good jokes. There's no such thing as a German joke.
Yes, I suppose you're right. Yeah.
Say goodnight, Gracie.
Good night. Thanks for joining us. We'll check back with you next time. Can you believe it? We finally finished that episode. Boy, when True gets on a roll, he gets on a roll. But honestly, I feel like there is no better teacher of history of prints. Well, and other things, of course. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Platemark, Series 2, The History of Western Printmaking. We love having you listen to us, and we hope that you will share us with your friends and your sphere of influence. That's your SOI. And leave us a review if you think of it. Also, you should know that the images that True and I discussed during the episode are available to you to check out as you listen. They are over on the show notes page, which you can access through my website, either through AnnShafer.com or through PlatemarkPodcast.com. So they're all there for you, and they're probably worth looking at because there's a lot to them. I'd like to send a special thank you out to True. I think he's amazing, and I can't imagine doing this with anyone else. And also one to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. Otherwise, I think that's it. We will see you next time.